Did you know that Kabbalah is really a set of analogies? In this explainer, we will explore how historically Kabbalistic ideas were often explained with analogies that were contemporary to their day. In particular, ancient science was heavily used in these explanatory analogies. These analogies are discussed with source material in my latest book, Shomer Emunim, The Introduction to Kabbalah. Click on the link in the description below for details about my book. Before providing examples of these analogies, it is especially important to highlight that each one of these analogies is used to explain just a single aspect about the Kabbalistic idea it is being brought to illustrate. Therefore, only a highly restricted aspect of these analogies can be accurately compared with the specific idea it is explaining. Typically, most aspects of the analogy are not intended to be comparable to the Kabbalistic idea. Therefore, the analogy itself is not significant. And if an ancient scientific analogy was used that is now understood to be incorrect, it is only an analogy and does not distract from the Kabbalistic idea itself, and the point explained by the analogy is still valid. A simple, non-scientific but important example is the frequent use of gender as a Kabbalistic analogy. The male-female relationship is frequently used in Kabbalah, but has a very restricted scope, where the term male means the giver, the provider, the energy, and female means the recipient, the constraint, that which constrains the energy. Provider and recipient, energy and constraint. That's it. Unfortunately, the very physical language of Kabbalah has been misunderstood by many, even today, and they build all sorts of gender and psychological related frameworks out of Kabbalah that in truth, apart from borrowing Kabbalistic terminology, have nothing whatsoever to do with Torah-based Kabbalah in any way. Many of the ancient scientific analogies used in Kabbalah are rooted in Greek philosophy, which was the science of its day and prevailed as the primary understanding of the world for the best part of 2,000 years. Here are some examples of ancient scientific analogies. We have the concept of Sefirot in plural, or the singular form Sefirot. This is a key concept in Kabbalah, which we will visit later on in this series. In a nutshell, a Sefirot is an element in the process of the creation of an entity. The now invalid geocentric model of the universe, where the Earth is at the center and each planet revolves the Earth in its own sphere, is used in many Kabbalah texts to describe the structure of the Sefirot, where each planetary sphere is related to as a specific Sefirah. Although the word Sefirah has multiple meanings in Hebrew, it is safe to say that it was originally borrowed from the Greek word sphera, which was used to describe the planetary spheres in the geocentric model. To further explain this analogy, the Kabbalists also relate to the Sefirot as being configured like an onion, where each onion layer is analogous to a different Sefirah. Again, this analogy is very specific and limited. Then we have the four elements of earth, water, air, and fire. This concept is deeply integrated into almost all aspects of Kabbalah. Although today we have a much deeper and wider understanding of the elements, there is still an element of truth to them in that they can be generally understood to be referring to solid, liquid, gas, and energy. Then we have the Hayel. This is a concept of the initial creation of an intermediary substance, a type of ether, from which everything else is created. In contemporary terms, this may perhaps be understood to be the fabric of space-time, which will be touched on in a later explainer. Then we have substance and form and the four levels of life. These ideas are also deeply integrated into Kabbalah, where the levels of life, for example, as depicted by Aristotle in his book De Anima, being the inanimate, the plant soul, the animal soul, and the intellectual human soul, each progressively having additional form that is applied to the same underlying substance. This idea will be touched on in a later explainer. Then we have emission theory, sometimes called extra-emission theory, which among other things was used to explain how people thought they were aware of others looking at them from behind. This is used to analogously describe a highly specific scenario where a particular Kabbalistic entity that looks at something affects the something that it is looking at. Even though some people think emission theory is true due to a phenomenon known as confirmation bias, it is very clear that there is no basis to it. Nevertheless, the very specific Kabbalistic relationship is true. Then we have veins and bloodletting, phlebotomy. From antiquity until about 150 years ago, the interconnected system of body veins was understood to be highly integrated, with veins in each part of the body containing aspects of each other part of the body. For this reason, it was thought that letting blood from the veins of one part of the body would be able to cure other parts of the body. This was analogously used to explain the Kabbalistic principle that every whole contains the part, and every part contains the whole. Although this idea with veins is now understood to be false and bloodletting is no longer viewed as a general cure, we have better contemporary analogies for this idea, which we will return to later on in this series. So, to sum up, Kabbalah uses analogies to explain ideas and has always used contemporary scientific analogies of its day to present the best understanding possible. In the coming explainers, we will introduce some basic Kabbalistic ideas using modern scientific analogies, which are significantly more effective than the historic analogies, and they use language that is far better suited and accessible to us today in explaining these ideas. Before you go, don't forget, click on the link in the description below for details about Shomer Emunim, the Introduction to Kabbalah, which contains comprehensive explanations and sources for everything in this explainer series. So, thank you for listening and looking forward to seeing you in explainer number 3.